Direct traffic is traffic that comes to your site without any other source information accompanying it. In some ways, it is the absence of information. This is why you see here the default dimension is none. It can come when someone types in a URL directly, or perhaps if they saw an ad with the URL on it and came and typed that in, if they know it by heart because they frequent your site often, or even if you have a very easily guessed URL. Perhaps Microsoft.com, Pepsi.com, Ford.com, that kind of thing. It can also come from untagged links where tracking info has been stripped out. For example, JavaScript-created links, redirects, etc. One side note is generally a myth that bookmarks are responsible for direct traffic. If a visitor does return to your site in 6 months or less, the cookie will be maintained and it will be tracked under the previous site's source, not necessarily piled into the direct bucket. And the lack of info about direct can make it a challenge to do analysis, but all is not lost. There are some things we can detect about the visit that doesn't depend on the source tagging. For example, geodetection of the IP address to tell us what geographical area that visit came from. So let's take a look at this. Let's dimension by city and figure out which cities were the sources of our direct traffic. Now let's say, for example, that we had sent out a catalog where the URL was prominently displayed, and we think that a number of people may have typed in the URL directly after receiving this print campaign. In this case, we can switch on over to the e-commerce tab and take a look at the amount of revenue that came from each of these cities based on direct traffic. And one thing that points out at us here is that we see in Houston, Minneapolis, and Dallas, even though Houston had the largest number of visits, it had the lowest amount of value, meaning from all the visits that came there, I collected the least amount based on direct traffic. Now, of course, I don't know for sure that this traffic came from this particular mailer, but if I'm willing to make that assumption, either based on the fact that I got little to no traffic from them before, or I saw a spike right around the time that those mailers were sent out. Granted, this is not necessarily precise data, but it's a lot of information that I had before when we were just looking at one big lump sum of direct traffic. However, it's obviously less than ideal, and we want to avoid this if possible by the use of proper tagging. We'll take a look later in some campaign tagging videos to show how we can avoid this problem and get much more precise metrics. Direct traffic should be avoided whenever possible, but it's sometimes inevitable. With a little digging, there's some insight that can be salvaged.